So everyone likes to think they're good at money. And to be fair, most people aren't reckless, right? They save a little, they invest a little, they've got some insurance. But I would say here's the uncomfortable truth. A lot of smart, successful people have built their financial life the same way someone drafts a fantasy football team, right? They think they're drafting Patrick Mahomes, but somehow they end up taking Josh Rosen in the first round. So I want to do something different and fun today. If your financial life was a sports draft, who did you pick first? So let's break it down a little bit. Round one of most people's financial draft usually, from what I've seen, looks like this: hot stocks, crypto, real estate, the side hustle their buddy won't shut up about, whatever the next big thing is. And listen, these aren't necessarily bad, right? This is all important stuff, and this is all, rounds up a good, well diversified portfolio. Um, they're just being drafted way too early, right? This is the financial version of taking, Darius Hayward Bay with the first overall pick because you watched one highlight clip. It feels smart, it feels exciting, feels like you're ahead of the curve. But championship teams don't win drafts with highlights. They win drafts with structure. Which brings me to the most boring but most important part of the draft: the steals. The guys nobody's excited about on draft night, aka Draymond Green, right? But somehow they're still in the league 10 years later. So, in money terms, these are things like an emergency fund. I know, boring, right? Nobody brags about their emergency fund at a dinner party, but it's the financial equivalent of a left tackle who never gives up a sack, like Trent Williams, right? Joe Thomas. You don't notice him until he's gone. Proper insurance coverage is another one. Not just checking the box, not just, yeah, I've got something. I mean, actually understanding what happens if something goes wrong. This is defense, this is depth. This is how teams survive bad seasons. Then you've got things like retirement accounts with a match, like a 401k. Again, not necessarily sexy, but this is drafting a guy who gives you, 19 points a night for 15 years. Not flashy, but just reliable. And here's where most people mess it up. They want to skip this part of the draft entirely. They want to fast forward to the fun stuff: big plays, big bets, big upside. But that only works when you already have protection behind you. Because without that foundation, every investment is going to eventually feel stressful, right? Every market drop, you're going to feel a little bit more. It's going to feel a little bit more personal. Every bad month is going to feel like, the sky is falling. That's not investing, that's plain scared. So now let's talk about draft busts, right? Every team has them. And financially, the biggest busts usually come from the things people don't think about at all. Underinsuring liability is a huge one. People will spend hours debating investments and 5 minutes deciding how much they're protected if they get sued. That's like building a high powered offense and forgetting you still have to play defense, right? Another bust is having no income protection, no plan if something interrupts your ability to earn. That's drafting a franchise quarterback and having no sort of backup plan if, he ever gets hurt. Hope is not a strategy, guys, right? And then there's the classic bust pick: I'll figure it out later. That's not a pick, that's punting, right? Now, let's talk about how dynasty teams actually build wealth, right? Because the best franchises don't win by going all in every year. They don't swing for the fences on every play. They don't throw 80-yard bombs every play. They move the chains, they protect their assets, they draft for longevity. They understand contracts, risk, depth, timing. That's what long-term wealth looks like. Not sprinting for the end zone every down, right? And stacking 5 yard gains that add up over time, establishing the run, all those sorts of good things. And this is where most people, where people miss the biggest point, I'd say. Insurance and financial planning aren't two separate conversations. They're the same system. That's their offense and then their defense. They're the front office working together. They're one team. When I sit down with clients, I don't look at it as selling products. I look at it as building a roster, right? What's your foundation? Where are you exposed? Where are you overpaying? Where are you under invested in protection? Because money problems don't usually come necessarily from one catastrophic decision. They come from a bunch of small emotional, picks, I'd say, that seemed fine at the time. And the irony is this. Um, in sports, the scoreboard's always visible, right? You're going to know what the score is. You know where you are in the standings. You know when you're winning or when you're losing. With money, the scoreboard is delayed, right? Sometimes even by decades, which is why the smartest financial move isn't necessarily chasing highlights. It's building a team that can survive downturns, bad seasons, and still reap the upside, win titles, right? So, my advice at the end of the day, if you want to play the money game like, the best dynasties out there in sports, draft boring early, draft upside later, protect your stars, um, and stop drafting without a plan. That's how real wealth is built, right? Brick by brick, season by season. And just like sports, that the teams that win long term usually aren't the loudest on draft night. They're the ones quietly lifting trophies 10 years later because they've built together a solid foundation over time. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hit the subscribe button. If you ever want to learn anything about our agency, drop it in the comments below, and we will chat.